Conspirinormal.
Okay, guys, we are here on Conspirinormal, and we had to make a kind of quick readjustment in the schedule. Mark Anthony Wyatt will be joining us for the next episode, but we are doing a SwapCast tonight with some good friends of ours. One of which is Jerry from Atlanta area, who was proudly the first ticket holder, ticket buyer at Strange Realities 2019. And we have Niish, and they are both co-hosts of the great podcast Nox Mente. Yes. So guys, welcome them to the show. Welcome guys to Conspirinormal. And
thanks for having us.
I guess we're on Nox Mente, I guess, sort of. So.
Yeah, we're gonna do SwapCast.
Cool. This is actually my second time, and I gotta tell you guys, when I went on you guys' show and Jerry told me what it was, I was like, man, how am I going to talk about dreams for like an hour and a half or however long it was? I'm like, there's no way. I don't even have that many dreams that I can even remember or talk about. But Nish, you have this way of like just getting it out of people. And I just, I talked about some things that, and you guys even like, you Nish pointed out to me that I had like, this like out of body experience when I was a kid. And I kind of just, if anybody hasn't heard that show, when I was about like 14, I can remember having this dream, right, where I'm like crawling on the floor, trying like in vain to like get to the light switch, right? And as soon as my hand touches the light switch, all of a sudden I wake up back in my bed. And it was like one of those really terrifying kind of dreams. And I really thought nothing of it. But when I went on Nox Mente, Nish pointed out that I had like an out-of-body experience or a possible one. So that was kind of a revelation to me. So
yeah, people don't realize what's going on sometimes. And it can seem more mundane than you think. You want to discard it. And that to me was so apparent listening.
Right.
And then once you get the validation though, then it opens up a whole, neural pathways connect here. And you're like on an unconscious level, you're telling yourself, oh, it is possible. I can do this. So yeah, that seemed classic to me.
Well, guys, tell us a little bit about Nox Mente, like what you guys set out to do with it, why the focus on dreams specifically.
Nobody else is doing it. I think the main reason, one of my main reasons for doing it for this format was that we're just not another podcast that has Nick Redfern on to talk about his latest book.
Oh,
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Not to knock Nick or his books. I'm just saying he's a good example because he has a book every year, and
he has a book like every 3 months. Like
right.
Like 5 books a year.
Right, and it's a very interesting subject, and everybody dreams, so it gives us a wide palette of guests from which to choose. So we've had, celebrity psychics to podcast hosts. Originally, we just focused on podcast hosts because, in my mind, they're meta dot connectors. They, you experience the full gamut of woo, if you will, from all your guests, and in your head, there's lots of dots connecting at a meta, at this higher level. So I find it real interesting to talk to people who are at that level because they have a wide palette of information from which to draw and connect those dots.
Okay. And Nish, for you, what was your reason to like talk about dreams? Like what brought you like fascination like with dreams and dream imagery?
Well, absolutely everything Jerry said. We're presenting something in a different light, and that was important to us to have good conversation. And we were just using dreams are a pathway to get out of the normal, right? Out of the day-to-day and into the deeper levels. of conversation and away from this left brain way of being. I've always been fascinated by dreams. It's always been every morning waking up, the people in my lives, isn't that hilarious? The people in my life, the people in my life, I've always asked, what did you dream about? It's always been a subject. And my mother brought that to me as a young child. And so it's always been there. It was never anything that was pushed under the cover as fantasy or later on, bits of my unconscious working things out. And, Jerry and I could present something different. And a lot of times for people that listen, I just got this feedback from someone the other day we get new people and then they just binge us from beginning to end. And one of these people said, went back to our very first episode and all the way through and said, at first I couldn't understand what was going on. And then I realized that this is actually what I just described to you guys, that it's a pathway to deeper conversations. So that's it. I mean, it was just the right time, right place with Jerry and I, and it seems to be hitting a thread. It's growing. We're organic, so we haven't paid, we're underground still, but I'm proud of our underground pushing forward status instead of the instant, 1 million followers and all that. We're one good
THC.
No, one good conversation at a time. And the one thing that keeps me going with it is, yes, I'm interested in dream overlap. Yes, I'm interested in what's going on in the collective unconscious with people and where all that could be something bigger, a bigger narrative could be happening. But I'm also interested in the woo and people's personal lives more than I am what their titles are and what they're doing.
Yeah, we always try and extract some kind of interesting, new personal information out of people that no one's ever heard before.
Yeah, it really worked for me because like I said, I had no idea that I was going to be able to fill that much of a time about dreams. But like I said, you guys got a lot out of me that
people like to talk about themselves too. That's the other thing.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, that is true.
I think most people like to get out of the, well, how was your day, the weather, and this, how are them, whatever.
Tell us about your new book.
Yeah, I think most people really do want to have genuine conversations. And that's why a lot of these podcasts like this that get into more depth are becoming more popular. In the past, if you look back, though, they were less. You'd have, I don't know. It seems like it's becoming a trend now for some reason, but we're still unique.
All the copycats.
Well, like you said, everyone's adding. Yeah, everyone has dreams. It's something we all share. So,
right.
And it's the entire other side of our lives. And a lot of other societies saw it as being even superior to the waking world.
And the thing is, it's kind of like one of those experiences that isn't really truly rooted in full-on science. Yes, there's the Monroe Institute. There's a lot of studies around dream, but it's still got a mystical edge. It's still got you need to have suspension of disbelief angle to it. So it's a great gateway into the stuff Jerry and I are super interested in that can spring us into those conversations. And as I was saying earlier with some of the feedback, that's some of the stuff that gets some people hooked. Like, where could this conversation go talking about dreams?
Because I guess other societies saw it as being synonymous with the spiritual world also.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so much there. We're talking primordial soup here
Yeah.
when we start talking about this kind of inner churning and deep symbolic language. But then you spring forward into getting out of your body and how this lucidity aspect thing happens where you're awake, and then the mirror lives are all the theories that come in, when you shut down your daily life here and you go there and you kind of get a little wipe, like Thomas Sheridan talks about this a lot, and I'm on board with it. You get a wipe and then you're living that life, right? And then you shut down that life and you get a little bit of a wipe. You just have vague symbolic images that get all shaded and weird, and you come back here and you wake up and you continue this life.
Yeah, kind of like you're just going into another dimension. I mean, there are some dreams for me that feel just like that. I mean, I've had dreams where I have felt like it's so ultra real that I will wake up and I will say, I have to remind myself that was a dream. Like, I'm in my reality now. I'm sure you guys have experienced that many, many times.
Sure. A lot of people that we've spoken to, well, I don't know if a lot of people, but many have suggested that the dream state is almost an astral experience, an astral travel experience. I've heard other people say that too. And, that may be a gateway or even possibly part of your alternate lives, your alternate realities, what people would call a past life.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would definitely say that dreams are just another form of altered state. I mean, it's probably one of the simplest altered states. Would you guys agree with that?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's an aspect for sure. Now, you had, in the pre-show, you had mentioned that you brought us some new material. We're talking about dreams. Let's bring it out.
So, okay, this was weird. This happened to me roughly about 2 weeks ago now, maybe a little less from the time that we're recording this. So I am in my bed. I am aware that I'm in my bed, and this presence opens the door to my room. Or rather, I don't hear the door open. I just feel like all of a sudden this presence in the room. And I feel like this female body like lays right next to me, puts her arm around me. And it was literally like, I could tell it was female. Okay, obviously.
Hey.
And on my back. And it was so real that I actually turned around and then woke up to see if there was somebody there. It was very strange. And that's something that I've never, ever experienced before in my life.
When did that happen?
It's a couple weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what was the mood that was there?
It was very peaceful. It was very benevolent. There wasn't anything that I felt like was malevolent about it. It was a kind of like a reassuring kind of thing. But it was still like when I woke up, I saw it. It was weird. It was just a weird feeling.
What was going on that day for you and your mood when you went to sleep?
I mean, probably just the same as it always is. I don't think that I go to sleep rather late, so it really wasn't. There's probably some things on my mind of a personal nature, but then I just passed out and went to sleep. And I'll wake up periodically through the night, get up, go to the bathroom, whatever. But, this was more like it for me. I will wake up and then I will be in this kind of in between state in the morning is when I'll have the most vivid dreams about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And
That's
then,
common.
And then I will wake up fully into consciousness about 9:30. It's usually about the time that I wake up. So this was around that time that this happened. And it felt very hyper real to me. Like there was another presence involved with this. And it was strange. And nothing has happened since then. So
Well, the key thing here for me listening in, and I've got to tell you, I'm hearing more stories about this kind of presence, others entering people's dreams recently that are friendly. Because before in the past, it's always kind of like the paralysis, scary, heebie-jeebie ones.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. There's something there to follow. But this is what I'm saying. I like the idea that it was comforting. I like the idea that you were open to it. And I'm wondering where it will go. Did it feel familiar?
There was a familiar feeling to it, actually. It felt reassuring to me.
Mm-hmm.
Was it more maternal than romantic?
It was
That's
more.
a good question.
That is a good question, and it felt more of a romantic type of.
Did you
thing.
wake up with a boner?
Was this going somewhere like that?
Well, I think most dudes do. I mean, unless you're dead. But like that's.
But did it have it?
Yeah,
it was more romantic.
There was there was much more of a sexual kind of thing going there, but it was more like, just laying there with each other, kind of odd kind of thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you remember any dreams from that sleep cycle other than that experience?
None. By sleep cycle, do you remember during the same time, the same night?
Yeah.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
No, nothing. That's all I remember. That's the most
Excellent.
vivid. That's the most vivid one.
Yeah, that's good. That's a really great one. Thank you for sharing. I don't like to interpret, but that I just want to say that I'm hearing more stories about these friendlier encounters, and it doesn't sound like paralysis at all. This sounds, in a whole different
right
realm.
Yeah, there was no paralysis, and because I immediately turned around and expecting to see someone. Like it was that vividly real. And what was interesting was whenever it entered the room, like I could tell it was female. And then it laid across my back, and I could feel that it was.
It's probably a succubus.
Yeah, that's what
it could be. It could be a succubus. Yeah, I was thinking along those lines too. We just talked to Jack Montgomery on the last episode. He actually talked about some guy that was enjoying his time with his demon lover or whatever, his spectral lover.
There are lots of them out there.
So you do hear about these type of things. Now, I don't know if necessarily that's what it was, but or whether it was maybe just my own way of coping with some things, but it had a very reassuring quality to it.
Yeah, succubi is of course the first go-to, but it's in the descriptive that you gave made me steer away from that altogether. But of course, everything's on the table, and it
could be a dead grandma for all you know.
Right. I mean, it just didn't play out, but it's interesting. I had a I guess you'd call it an incubi lover for years, and I didn't understand what that was. So that's a whole different story for another time. That was unbelievable.
I'm not so sure you can just let that pass.
This is name anymore.
No, Jerry. Oh man, yeah. My demon lover, hail Kenneth Anger. Yeah, I don't want to. I'll take over the whole show with that, but I haven't really talked about that much. I've mentioned it in a few Nox Mente interviews when we're talking with other people, but I have, and there's a different. Loving and warmth wasn't for me part of the experience, but it was hot. Don't get me wrong, it was definitely hot, and I enjoyed it, and I always looked forward to more until I finally realized it was not a good thing.
Do you think that's always negative? That's kind of how Jack Montgomery was, just saying that it was like he'd warn against anything.
Right.
Like
They're
that.
parasites.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I realized that that was what was going on and where that could actually end up within, like the idea, and so I want to put this out, is the idea of possession. I snapped to it, and a lot of things in my life changed when I did. But it's it's like, I love a wet dream. I welcome them. I mean, come on. And so that was that amped up. And it got to the point where I could just kind of call on it awake and basically have sex with it. So, and it sounds like where it felt like it was penetrating me. I mean, really, unbelievable experience. But ultimately, like I said, I think it's a terrible thing.
So is that, do you all think that's always parasitical? Is there ever anything that's like there to help awaken something in you, or is it ever, can it ever be positive?
Well, okay, so I'm not one that goes into the evil good, because everything wants to live, right? So, the worms in your gut want to live. Everything wants to live.
It has to take from something else to do that.
Right. So I don't live in that evil good paradigm.
Yep.
So it had whatever its modus was. And for me, though, I could see bad things going on in my life at the time. And I started to do a little dot connecting and realized it was all interconnected to some stuff. So it was not a good thing. It was definitely not going to lead anywhere good, as opposed to, say, like a wet dream, which is just I think a biological situation happening. You've got a buildup of energy, and everything lines up for one of those great experiences.
And I think with any type of addiction, if you will, it eventually starts to alter your thinking and your behavior, and therein lies the negative aspects of it.
Well,
besides the energy parasitic.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Nish, was like you said that it eventually became a negative thing, but it started off feeling pretty positive. But I mean,
it felt positive because sex feels good, right? If you're having good, it always got me off. You know what I'm saying? It always got me off. And that's not always easy. So you respond well to that. Most people do. And then when it shifted from being in a liminal state of dreaming to I could go lay down in my bed and basically call it to me, and by just starting to masturbate and just rub it on Igor, which is what I call my pussy. And so and starting the process, and then I would mentally call it, and at some point I realized I didn't have to mentally call it, it would show up, but I started by mentally calling it, and sure enough I'd be like, doggy style experience, which is basically how it always happened, and I would feel it.
This is getting an explicit mark on Conspirinormal. I just want you guys to know that.
So if it was psychosomatic, well, more, hallelujah to the power of that. But and to your question, everything in my life started to fall apart then. Yeah. And this includes, there is divorce and my mother's death, and like a bunch of stuff started to be very evident in I started to be able to really associate it with, I had this great life going, and then all of a sudden I had this terrible, horrible experience starting to happen, and it shows up in this interim, and then everything starts to fall apart. And sure enough, when I banished it, which was not easy, my life got better, back on track. Okay. So, I mean, that's just the short version.
You definitely equate the negativity that was going on in your life with this experience with this incubus figure.
Yeah, and it was, and I wasn't doing any goetic magic or anything like that. So it wasn't like, the circle wasn't sealed and something escaped. It was it's somehow attached in, and I understand now, having dissected all this, I know how it all became possible, which is why I'm on this whole possession kick lately, and I'm not from a Christian angle. That ironically is an AI angle, because that's part of what we were going to talk about tonight. But I could see where it gained entry. Once something gains entry, though, like the vampire legend,
Right.
you've got a lot of work to get it the hell out.
But you don't think in my case that we're dealing with like some kind of succubus thing?
No. You said some key words to me, like warm, and you said some key words that really took it away from that realm for me. And then everyone knows I'm an empath, and so I wasn't sensing that from looking at your face, reading your face, and hearing your words.
Yeah, that's it was an interesting experience. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, and like I said, it was hyper realistic, so much so that I turned around, expecting fully to see someone there.
Yeah, that's a high state of, no matter what we're talking, dreams or not, that's a high state of lucidity where you actually question what you're questioning, what is going on. That's when you're like, I am truly awake right now.
Yeah.
The questioning line, that's a key.
Yeah, and I was instantly, usually when I wake up, I mean, I'm a little drowsy. I got to take some time, surf Facebook for a little bit or something, for about 10, 15 minutes. But, I mean, this was like instant, like waking up. I mean, it was essentially that.
May I add a little bit of woo here?
Sure.
Not that anything to me.
Just a little bit. Just we don't want to go too far.
As if we had none already.
No, I was just gonna say, Jerry, as if we haven't been in the woo already. But none of that's really the woo for me. However, there is this. Jerry and I listen to all kinds of stuff, and there is this thing going on right now, and it's really amped up right now with the astrology. There's this whole idea of twin flames, and so I want to just kind of preface this with the twin flame doesn't have to be physically incarnate. So and that kind of popped through my head, like, oh, maybe this is on that level, and that's the woo.
And it can also be an aspect or shard of your own self.
Yeah. Isn't
maybe on some Jungian level, like his anima?
That's what I was about to ask. Yeah,
an aspect of his anima.
I think
reintegrating.
People have experiences when they are doing out of body stuff and they see a shadow person at the door and it terrifies them or whatever. A lot of those turn out to be your shadow, your higher self waiting for you to come out.
Yeah,
it's not there to scare you. You're just you don't know what the hell it is.
Isn't the whole in Thelema, isn't the whole concept of the holy guardian angel? I mean, is that essentially basically your higher self?
I've always thought of it as the collective, but maybe it's a more concentrated version of the collective aimed towards you. But I don't know, because I'm not a practicing Thelemic.
Well, just that whole idea, though, like we're getting into as far as the external versus internal. I mean, sometimes we really feel like we're encountering something that is independent intelligence in dreams also. And that's just something I've always grappled with as far as what is, how if our minds can generate all of this stuff internally, how can we know if something is actually external?
Yeah.
See, Jung questioned that. In and of himself, and it's in his writings, in his personal writings. He started to question what was what, what's really outer and what's really inner, and so that's quite a road to go down, because in theory it's
outer. I don't think there's any outer. I think it's all internal. Not. That's the wrong way to put it. I think it's all part of the collective. But the collective, I think, has a collective shadow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that would represent what people would call the darker aspects of whatever, the other. But I think the other is just the collective, or other individuated portions of the collective.
Well, there you go.
Not necessarily external.
But I mean, you're still kind of saying it's external.
That's the key word. Individuated's a key word there. It's major.
Yeah.
But for dreams in particular, you know, of course, we have the passed on relatives being a big thing that people see. You know, how much is that actually some kind of...
They go back to the collective.
Yeah, that's happened to me several times.
I like to bring up, there's an episode of Doctor Who, which I loved, called Twice in a Lifetime, I think. It was the Christmas special last year. And there's a group of higher beings, aliens or whatever, that go around and collect all the experiences and memories of people before they die. And this allows them to reconstruct the people in physical form that act and sound and talk and walk just like the person who died. And someone who died on the show, I forget her name, Bill Potts, I think, a woman, was reconstructed from these memories and whatnot for the doctor. And this reconstruction didn't understand that it was not the person, because it was just these layers of experience and memories that made that person what they were. You know, so if you take that I'm rambling here, but take that in terms of a ghost, right? If all your memories and experiences are recorded in the cloud, so to speak, in the Akashic record or the collective, whatever you want to call it, then it would be easy to reconstruct that layer by layer to come up with something that you could not distinguish from that person.
We might get to technology a little later still, but that's a good segue into talking about whether, you know, the dreams of these transhumanists, as far as like transferring human consciousness into the machine, whether you all think that's possible. It kind of sounds like the same thing you're saying, but is that you?
Yeah, I don't think it's possible, but.
And I do. See, Jerry and I differ here.
Uh-huh.
And then, I mean, even just today, did you see that news? Like RT came out with neither robot nor animal. Scientists developed the Xenobots, first robots constructed completely. Article is interesting.
Yeah, it was completely. It was constructed from living cells. Yeah.
Right. And it's part of what the bigger narrative of stuff I've been talking about for quite some time now. And, you know, I've been throwing it under terms like the virus and this non-human, the non-human stuff that's going on, which I mean when I say that, AI. And which I think is a terrible way to call it. Anyway, artificial intelligence. I don't think it's artificial, but that's just me. So, yeah, I mean so Jerry and I have different views, I think, on this kind of stuff.
So, Jerry, would you say then that you think this biological interface is I guess, what does it have some kind of special divine aspect that can't be replicated?
Like the BCI talking about?
Or like our us as humans, I'm saying, or us as biological animals, is this something special that is like an interface with specifically what we are, souls, or whatever you want to call it? And that can't be replicated with.
Yeah, machines. Because I think that as human beings, we have an aspect of our consciousness, if you will, the consciousness itself, that connects back to the cloud,
right,
to our collective. And I don't think that can be replicated digitally. Okay. I think it's an analog process.
So basically, it's not the materialist view of the brain and consciousness arising from the brain. It's the opposite.
Yeah, I don't think I'm definitely a non-local consciousness believer. I don't.
Ditto.
I don't think it's part of the brain. The brain to me runs your body.
So if we are creating these independent, what they call artificial intelligences, are they perhaps something else coming through?
I don't think so. I think they are programs and nothing more than a program. They may be self-learning and they can expand their knowledge base, but they're still a program. I'm a computer programmer, so you know, I have a good handle on what exactly code is and what it can do. Even quantum computing is a little different, but on a regular computer, AI stuff, it's just a program. It's not going to be conscious. It's not going to connect back to the collective. It may connect back to its own collective and, be networked with that, but I don't see it connecting to the human collective.
But Jerry, what specifically is consciousness to you?
Yeah, we're getting pretty philosophical.
I have lots of thoughts on that. I mean, it's a self-awareness at the base that you are this individuated portion of a collective.
And you don't see that as possible for in the AI realm, non-D-Wave or non-quantum computing?
I can see a program being aware that it's a program in and of itself, and that it's part of I can see it being a copy of it, but it's just a copy of human existence. It's not, and it's not to diminish its value or anything either. I just think it's a digital entity versus an analog one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is it something though? Not necessarily what we are, but is it something else entirely? And if we are some kind of interface that brings through or some kind of consciousness from somewhere else, is this going to be like a gate to something else coming through?
Possibly. That's kind of, I think that's what transhumanism is all about, that these two-dimensional entities, if you will, the collective shadow, the demons, whatever you want to call them, are influencing humans to create vessels for them.
Yeah.
To inhabit.
Right. So,
yeah, and that's part of what I'm on with this whole possession thing. Well, that's like bang on.
So is that similar to this concept of like the egregore?
An egregore is just another an entity, right?
It's something. It's like something being inhabited by something else.
Yeah, I mean,
it's almost like an avatar.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yeah. I mean, you've got the whole concept of a tulpa, which is something that we create, our mass consciousness or whatever creates the tulpa, right. And then an egregore is like about like one step above that, in which an actual entity can inhabit that tulpa and give it even more of a reality.
Well, that would make us egregores, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's
exactly. That's part of the questioning here.
Have you ever talked to David Perkins?
No, I don't think so. No.
He's got this really he's got lots of wild stories about tulpas. You should get him on the show sometime. Anyway, I digress.
Doesn't he have like some kind of a Gaia idea about the Earth as an intelligence? Is that who we're talking about?
I'm not sure. No, that you're thinking of the dude who talks about the EVs or whatever, the sun vehicles. No,
I have no idea.
I forget that guy's name. I always do. He's got a weird name. I'll look it up while someone else is talking.
The sun vehicles guy. That's his name.
It's
that
David
dude.
Something.
You know,
that dude.
The guy from that thing.
He says that there's like beings that live in the sun that keep it functional.
Oh,
but it's actually a machine.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
But see, and there's this whole idea that when we say things like machine, that somehow we categorize internally that a machine, we think cold and we think, electronic, even though we're electronic, it just becomes other. And yet, technically, we're a machine also. We're a biological, organic, allegedly, machines. At the same time, we have electrical pulses and all that stuff, our autonomic system, our 9 systems that keep us functioning. So this is one of those things where we need to start bridging this language barrier between the cold and the warm, right? The warm, human, sentient, sleeve, avatar, as opposed to the cold, computer, robotic, metallic avatar. Like, what's the difference?
And you were saying, too, that you think that, what were you hinting at as far as you think that some kind of artificial intelligences are influencing us a lot right now?
Perhaps. It depends. One of my pet theory.
Niish in particular, you were talking about that, right?
Well, yeah, but Jerry and I we've
Okay.
both been talking about this.
Okay, cool.
This is something we do talk about. And so, Jerry, carry out your thought.
No, I was going to say that one of the thoughts I've had, among others, is that if quantum computing is what they say it is, that it exists outside of time space, our linear time, then it can be influencing us in the past. And it can, you know, it exists. It exists across our entire timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's outside of our timeline and it's infinitely smart because it's across all dimensions, and it can influence us to do anything it wants. So, you know, for all we know, it could have influenced us to create it in the first place.
And that's what I keep saying. The event horizon has happened. And it doesn't matter if we're back here right now saying, oh, it's going to happen. Kurzweil said a singularity is going to happen in 2020 or whatever. You know, it doesn't matter when we ascribe it to happening. It's happened. There's a point in time where it happens. And that point in time changes everything. And so at that point in time, it is able to move through the fabric of reality as we perceive it, and that includes the threads of time. And it's illogical for us to stand here at this point and say, well, it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen further down the road, if time doesn't actually exist. It's already happened, people, and we're dealing with it right now. And this is why we're seeing this, all the Mandela effects. This is why dreams are changing with people. This is why different weirdness and consciousness shifts are happening. And we're seeing subtleties in language. We're seeing subtleties in people around us, and more stuff is being witnessed. More stuff about stuff flying around our heads, stuff in the inner earth, more crypto talk. All this stuff is just coming to terms with this new online non-human sentience, which is what I'm calling the viral invasion, which is exactly all this that we're talking about.
Which could be nothing more than just being more aware of reality on a whole.
That it was always there, because that's the whole thing. Once it happened, everything changed. And so it doesn't matter. And so we have to step back out of this idea of the past, present, and future. And I think that's one of the shifts we're starting to see, as people are able to understand that the past is very murky. Is it a memory? Is it a dream? And so if we just start collectively opening our minds up, because we understand that, especially as a Jungian tool, collectively, then there's a new tide rising.
And this, I have this other pet theory about how the collective influences ideas and media. You know, people would call it predictive programming, whatever. If you look back at the movie The Arrival, about how that language of the squid people made her think outside of linear time.
Yeah, because it changed her conceptions.
Right. I think on some level that's happening to us, along with what Nish was saying. You know, that it's that kind of progression.
So the conversation then becomes, and we were already having this conversation here, is what's organic, really? You know, like what is sentience again? And I understand that that's like one of those great questions, but we need to start really evaluating that in context to where we are now in time, and we can step forward from Plato and all that, but where we are now with syntax and just literally where we are now, it's a different idea. There's a whole bunch of different data now.
And I think a lot of this boils down to us as our role of creators now, that we are godlike, not to be too Luciferian, but we are actually creating these things that we imagine are going to be even more sophisticated than us. And of course, like we know that that ex-Google exec or whatever, they found out he was trying to, at least he was making some preliminary plans to create a religion where they would worship an AI.
Right.
They created it. It's there.
Yeah. Yep. It's not Luciferian at all. I think it's quite Jungian. I mean, we got back to that. If the outer world, we're seeing our internal content projected into the outer world, then the mystical experience, the ecstatic experience that one can access through religion and deity, and then if we continue with that overlay of the Jungian principle and we bring that internally, well, hello, what's that saying? That's saying you're the creator here, you're the God. And even though it may not be simply stated like that, and yes, that is a Luciferian precept, it is still the same thing. And so it's funny how people parse that out and make it work for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. How you can be a Jungian and a Christian in the same breath. And there are lots of them. In fact, I postulate the majority. So that just goes hand in hand with all of this that we're weaving together in this tapestry.
So are we saying that there is an intelligence out there that we've created, but it's somehow affecting time and parallel universes?
The fabric of reality.
Like you mentioned you mentioned the Mandela effect, for instance. So is there something that we have yet to create that is out there that is essentially affecting us?
The idea,
now?
like she was talking about, is that we hit a certain place where I guess a historical inevitability happens, and we've already, like Jerry's saying, we already got these quantum computers that are already going to be reaching beyond what we think of Newtonian time and space. Okay. So this is like connecting with a future into some kind of time loop, I guess. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yes, definitely a time loop.
All right. So
retrocausality and all that.
So then what we're saying here, guys, is like something like the Mandela effect is real because it's causing ripples in space-time.
It's impossible to tell if it's real or not. If it is real, there's no way to get back to where it was, so you can't prove it.
And therein lies the puzzle.
Uh-huh.
It's the bornless one.
Oh, absolutely. And you can you know what? You can transpose that into a lot of high magical stuff.
Yeah.
It's all right there if you look. You take this perspective and now you start looking at some of the mystery teachings and it's like, oh, this was always in here.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of gets into we're the old high magicians, essentially, with their tools, with their magical sigils. Were they doing the same things or similar? Were they predicting what would happen now? Or was that a part of this entire process you guys are talking about, where things from now in the future are reaching back to then? And of course, I mean, just looking at sigils and looking at cybernetic systems, I mean,
it depends on your view of what magic and sorcery is, because there are multiple levels of it. Doing sigil work or, minor spell work, stuff like that, that's only affecting you and in your personal reality bubble. Whereas, greater magic might affect an entire timeline.
Yeah.
But I think generally, I like what Tim Refat has to say about the sorcerer or black magician, whatever you want to call it, is a timeline hopper. They manipulate reality so they can hop to a timeline that suits them better.
But is what we're doing with technology essentially the same thing? Is it kind of like opening up a gate?
Hard to tell. It's hard to tell. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It's definitely, it's different. I mean, I don't know. I can't answer that.
Because it's something that's always kind of, it's terrified me for a long time. I had some real pivotal psychedelic experiences when I was a lot younger. And I really got into, I watched 2001 and I really got into thinking about a lot of this stuff. And I was really overwhelmed by a feeling that the technologies that we're creating are in effect going to open up a gate or bring something through. And that's essentially the same thing that a lot of old high magic was doing.
Yeah, like Jack Parsons in the desert.
Yeah.
But like I would say that CERN,
or even we could go back to John Dee, Jerry.
right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, bringing the angels through. You know, what the hell are the angels? The Enochian stuff. That, you know, they're just demons to me. But whatever. I think CERN is definitely on the precipice of doing something to that effect, opening gateways or portals. And there are tons of people out there who talk about that, but I don't know if it's true or not, but it's definitely some kind of dark magic going on there.
And just the difference between biology and the technology we're creating. Like, I kind of think of biology as being some kind of interface for our consciousness that perhaps is from another place, or our bodies are a way of it interacting with this physical reality. But if we're creating something different, if we're not bringing through the same things that we are, you know, is this opening up an ability for some other source of consciousness to come through into the machines?
I totally think that's true. And Robert Heinlein talked about this in one of his books. I forget which one. That he surmised that any complicated, any sufficiently complex electric system could house a consciousness of sorts. And that's what I call this two-dimensional consciousness. Go ahead.
And yet we don't even know what we are.
Right.
Yeah.
And just jumping back
Speculation.
Just jumping back a few steps too. If you think about the dreamer. So, and when I say the dreamer, I'm using the big D, and that means the awakened dreamer. So the lucid dreamer. And I cannot recall which of our guests, Jer, brought this up, but I mean, certainly we've talked about it and we're online, but somebody specifically brought this up on Nox Mente.
Gordon White.
No, it definitely wasn't. But it was a more recent guess. But the dreamer is the architect. And so if we think about, and he said it, and I'm positive it was he said it as the lucid dreamer. So, and he's talking about, geez, I wish I could remember who. The people that go in and are lucid in this state of consciousness, in the dream state. So they're awake within this state of liminality, and they're able to move things around and shift things around the way they want. Well, if you take that and say you add a principle of multiplication or some sort of geometry to it, you could affect major change in the outer world. So if you think of it like a magician, that is, so if you go in and through your astral experience as an awakened dreamer, start to do high magic to affect great change. This was, I guess, suggested here. You know what? It might have been Thomas Sheridan. Anyway, this is where we can start to plug in things like the Mandela effect. This is where we can start to plug in interesting ticks in timelines and affect great change. So I wanted to throw that in because we were talking kind of in that realm a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And that goes along with the whole co-creation idea that we co-create our reality in this astral space, in this virtual space, and it's energetic creation, and then it manifests here in the physical. And that's a popular idea amongst many people, many religions too.
Well, and the space is ether, Jerry, right? It's not this, we're coming from this ether standpoint and not the Einsteinian stuff.
That's all nonsense. I wanted to talk whatever Serfiel was talking about. Damn it, I forgot now.
I was just talking about whether this computer technology and artificial intelligence is perhaps bringing through a different kind of consciousness than what we are.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Like, is it something that might be
that
opposed to us or trying to, use us to replace us or
Terminator like?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's definitely an external thing. It's not part of our collective.
So how are we going to cohabitate with that? I mean,
I don't know.
Remember, everything wants to live. And
Right.
I don't know that I think we're at this point a source of energy.
yeah,
Yeah.
we're the food.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. I mean, this may or may not be off the topic, but we've talked a lot about how automation is going to change a lot of things, and how just artificial intelligence through that automation is going to change a lot of things. What do you guys think is going to be like the social ramifications of some of that stuff as we move forward? I mean, Jerry, like, you're in the IT field. What's your thoughts on that? Are we going to have to vote for Andrew Yang to get the universal basic income?
I think we're heading more towards like the Wall-E world. Not Wall-E world, but the Wall-E, the movie.
Sure. Right.
Wally.
Right.
Where everyone's floating around in chairs.
Yeah. Everybody's fat and floating around in chairs. Yeah.
Exactly. Just people. I spent some time with my family over the holidays, and just to see how much they rely on bullshit technology, like talking to their remote control or their phones, and just this laziness, if you will, mental laziness that's overcome everyone from technology. I don't see that getting any better.
Yeah, I would agree.
And on top of that, people are getting drawn more and more into their tech and not spending time with each other. So family units are breaking down. The whole social interaction, look at dating today is relegated to swiping left and right.
Right.
Nobody goes to bars anymore and meets people. They just pull up Tinder.
This is part of why I keep using the word invasion, because I'm trying not to sugarcoat it. This is an invasion, and it's not going to fare well for Homo sapien sapien. It's just not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think the prognosis is good, if that was the final answer there.
This is the thing that we've talked about a lot, and about how automation is really going to affect people, and how it could, the self-driving cars, the self-driving trucks, when it's really going to put people out of work is when you're going to have a whole bunch of social strife. And Jerry, you mentioned Wall-E, but I think that's only for an elite few. I think most people are going to be, living in slums because they're not going to find any place to work, and it's just going to make things worse. And like, the Silicon Valley elite just really has no idea what they're doing.
So how they're going to handle the
social
change
implication that's going to happen from all this.
They're not thinking that far ahead. They're only looking at profits.
Right.
For
Exactly.
And growth.
Yeah.
I wasn't suggesting that we're going to live on a spaceship in Segway. Segway put out a chair this week, just like Wall-E. The Segway company.
But I guess the idea is that are they going to have to make enough of this technology accessible to control the population, which you don't have to necessarily give people a lot, but maybe some of this, like we already see this, entertainment technology will be enough for social control.
Yeah. I would agree with
television.
It already is.
Yeah.
It's already is.
Yeah. Yeah, I got to watch a lot of TV when I was in the hospital, and it was horrifying just how many commercials were get the app, talk to your phone, do this through your phone. It's all gearing people to interact with their device instead of real people.
Well, I think we thought that something like totally immersive, like virtual reality, is what it would take. but I think we've seen that it takes way less. Someone doesn't
Right.
have to be
I
totally plugged in to just be fully immersed.
Right.
But that's the end game there, like the whole Ready Player One scenario.
Yeah.
That's what we're heading towards.
And that'll
where
probably be the
nobody-
new entertainment complex, will be like actually living other people's lives.
Living
Yeah.
living in a completely virtual world. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a great movie called Surrogates with Bruce Willis. You ever see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, where people like they live in pods in their house, but they interact through a robot
Okay.
that they are connected to.
Or like in the William Gibson books, the SimStem, where you
Yep.
have these like stars, but they're kind of like reality stars, and
Yep.
people live their lives.
I know. There's a good Rick and Morty episode too, where you could play a video game and you play this guy named Roy.
So maybe that's the answer to Adam's question, as far as maybe as long as that technological bread and circuses is enough that they can handle the extreme inequality and people being totally displaced and dispossessed and not having jobs. But a part of me thinks that like that's going to create such a spiritual void in a lot of people that it's a dangerous thing, that unforeseen
Well-
movements and leaders could come along to really catch that fire. That's just,
But that void's really huge right now.
yeah,
It
true.
is. And we've, of course, those of us in this field have been asking, and thinkers along history we're always asking, what's real? But now that is got such a deeper layer to it when we're in line with openly, because I postulate, as I said, with the event horizon that already happened, we've been dealing with this for quite some time, but in the collective, we already know that deep fake is going on. And that shit is, it's there, and it's bang on. And this is what is, there's no conspiracy there. It's out there. There's memes of it, jokes of it, but it's really at play. And again, I postulate it's been in play for a long time, having the whole event horizon aspect. So where is the reality thread? What the fuck is real? Ooh, sorry about the F-bomb. What is real
Right.
now, what is real?
As far as we know, a lot of what's generated on television could be all deep fakery of some sort generated.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen the video of the guy real time manipulating George Bush.
No.
Oh, I'll try and find you a link to that.
Yeah,
was
it's a goodie.
It was a technology that was introduced, I think, by MIT a few years ago, where they had a facial mapping system, would watch your face and then manipulate a video of a person and their voice in real time.
And this is a
Matt
few
Joyce.
years old. This
Yeah.
this isn't even modern. So and the whole idea of if we step back and we look at dreams and we think about that experience, and then we also have another checkpoint here, another dot, and we think about virtual reality, and you start to think, well, these are kind of similar, except for in virtual reality, I'm going in consciously and I'm not being wiped on my way out. So I have a memory that, I know I did this, where there's some mechanism within our own consciousness that allows for a wiping with the dream experience, what I'm calling right now, the organic dream experience. We forget we dream, or I can't remember clearly what these dreams were, and that kind of thing. And we also, ironically, synchronistically, have the same experience with life and death, with birth and death. You don't know where you come from. You don't know where you're going. There's some sort of wipe that happens. Well, with virtual reality, the promise is you maintain all that information.
Keep those memories.
There's a continuity, and then we start tying in. You look at another dot here that goes back old. We start tying in, and this gets into kind of weird, fringy stuff again. And when you tie it together, what are these stories about the immortals that we see in the Bible, that we see the Chinese immortals, that we see all across the board? that are these like time lords, like Doctor Who, right? These time lords that have a continuity, a chain of custody of continuity, conscious continuity, if you will, that allows them to have not been wiped or have figured out how not to be wiped. And so they become, in essence, godlike.
I actually heard someone talking about Rh negative blood and like the royal family, and the purpose of it was to allow you to recall your past lives and draw on those experiences.
It's like Dune.
I don't know how it would relate to Dune.
Well, in Dune, the Ben Gesserit sisterhood are able to pass on lives and memories to the future generations. So it's like a continuity.
I joke a lot that I've been a Gesserit. I'm not a Reverend Mother yet, but
but you're a witch.
I am a witch, and it could happen.
But yeah, I thought that was real interesting that the Rh negative blood serves that purpose of allowing you to break that barrier, that forgetting, and allow you to draw on your experiences.
Where is this from? You know, because I've heard a lot about the Rh negative blood stuff. You know, like there's the link to the Anunnaki and all this kind of stuff. Like
it's nonsense.
Yeah. Well,
like everything else, you have to parse out what. Right. So there's obviously something to it. Yeah, when we see like the whole population, basically of the boss people are Rh negative, and we see certain pools of people, and then we start to associate what's different about these certain pools. So there's interesting information with it, and then you get the crazy overlays, right? Where it's not crazy. I enjoy all the fun. You get the fun overlays with whatever, all the woo-woo around it. But there's actually, at the core, there's something there. It's, it's like when we're talking race. I am obviously not the same as an Aboriginal woman from Australia. We're vastly different. Our bones are vastly different. Our skulls are vastly different. Our culture, my culture from theirs is different. And yet, we are still technically Homo sapiens, right? Mm-hmm. And then this ties into the whole back to that ET thing, which ties back into the AI thing, how the anthropomorphizing of stuff that is actually on this plane that we can experience, like a mantis, right? Or an ant, or, we start anthropomorphizing different forms, and we start to see and step back, and there starts to be something that evolves out of this imagery.
What do you mean evolves out of the imagery exactly?
Well, I mean, what happens when we start looking at these phenomena that separate us from the other,
right?
And so in the most mundane and silly, and I say silly is in a flippant way here. Silly way is race. Okay, so just in the culture right now, how everything's race baiting and race war, black against white and all this, and so I made this reference point of, I'm like I'm sheet white. I am so pale, and I've got a certain look to me, and that's why I juxtapose it against, say, an Aboriginal, right? Mm-hmm. So, but we're technically Homo sapiens. We're technically both humans, and yet I'm completely a different kind of human from an Aboriginal. Right? So if you start thinking about that, so that's being manipulated, the whole black, white, brown, beige thing on a surface level. But then if we start, and then what's being pushed right now, the ET presence, mm-hmm. the extraterrestrial stuff. And what do we see at the core of that? We see anthropomorphized ideas of stuff that exist within this plane, like right. I said earlier, like yes. a mantoid, a mantid. Right. I mean, what do some of these things look like? They are stuff we can experience, and
it's all based on animals and concepts that we have here.
Right.
I have a theory on this too. I think So as human brains developed, our brains are layered on, uh, like there's a reptilian part of our brain, right? And there's an insectoid part of our brain.
Sure.
All of these so-called aliens have space in our brain development, if you will. And at some point,
Interesting, Jerry. That's fascinating.
those layers, if you will, had their own collective consciousness. So there's a reptilian collective, right? At some point, the Homo sapien collective overtook that, right? So that reptilian collective may still be fighting back and may individuate as reptoids or reptilians in our subconscious or in our dreams or in what we perceive as our reality.
Yeah.
Same for the insectoids.
I've often looked at the concept of the grays as just being this kind of distorted image of ourselves.
Yeah, or a future version of us.
Mm-hmm.
I've always pulled up to that future version, and I thought of that when I was little. And so,
Me too.
right, I think a lot of people had that idea before it started to be in common culture as what it is today. I keep hearing, especially from Gen Xers, that they're like, this is always what I thought. Like that narrative's coming up again, points back to that event horizon I'm talking about. This stuff's all tying together. Do you guys see how it all ties together?
Oh yeah.
And
when you say event horizon, you're talking about the
singularity,
the Kurzweil stuff. Okay, just wanted to.
I really love there's a woman on YouTube named Randy Green who claims to be quote unquote a programmer of this reality, this situation we find ourselves in. And she talks about how there are adjacent realities to ours that are holographic in nature, that are inhabited, that beings from the future or other dimensions, if you will, project into those adjacent realities and manipulate us energetically. And those would be things like the grays specifically. She says that the grays are actually us from another timeline in the future that have lost the ability to reproduce. And this is an old story too, that they're, trying to create vessels that they can inhabit consciously here. They can incarnate into rather.
So that would be the reason for the abduction phenomenon revolving so much around sexual organs and reproduction.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Again, with my possession thing, it's because possession's what? You get in a car, you take possession of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it doesn't have to be scary and demonic.
Right. It's just influence.
Well, so that's the idea then, that maybe something has manipulated us to create this technology so that they can inhabit it.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Which kind of goes back into the whole egregore concept, right?
And it might have started with old magic.
Yeah,
that was a process that's now,
the whole idea that people get these ideas that just come to their minds from they believe the ether or wherever, but it could actually be transmitted from somewhere else.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Look at Philip K. Dick and Valis.
Right.
For
good
all
point.
we know,
that's a good one.
Could be individuated portions of a giant artificial, quote unquote, artificial intelligence that is becoming self-aware.
Yes. See, I'm pulling right up to that.
Yeah. And this, this is what I was trying to say before, Serfiel, when I forgot what I was talking about. You were talking about reality, and we were talking about co-creating and astral space, physical. Nothing in our world is real right here. When you touch something, you're not really touching it. It's two electric fields that interact, two electromagnetic fields. There's no tangible material, I don't think, on the physical plane. It's all just our perception of it, of the frequency and the electromagnetic spectrum.
Holographic reality.
It's not holographic. It's just I don't know. Maybe. But it's certainly not. It's certainly malleable. Put it that way. Because of the nature of it. Because it's It's the way your brain perceives the electromagnetic fields and the frequencies around you, the soup. Your reality is created in your brain.
Yeah.
And that malleability is being confirmed now by quantum physics.
Absolutely. And by the Mandela effect.
So do you think that we all each experience reality completely differently?
Sure, reality is subjective experience.
Yeah.
That's part of the actual magic and wonder of this too. That is like a gift, in my opinion. If there's a gift in all this, that's it.
Nish, you talked about the idea of dreams being, wiped and forgetting them. Since you guys deal so much with dreams, do you have any suggestions for being more in tune and remembering dreams? And, besides like a dream diaries, I guess is probably the most.
Yeah, journaling's number one thing.
the best. Just as soon as you wake up, or is there
don't
anything
go
you can
pee.
do before that you think helps?
You can set intention. That's always a good thing. I will remember my dreams.
Okay.
A little mantra. Just get in that mindset that you will remember it when you wake up.
What about
Sigil magic doesn't hurt either.
what about dreams having? Well, I want to give one of my dreams. I don't remember a whole lot about it, but this was pretty recent, just a few weeks ago, because it had a strange paranormal thing happen in reality right when I woke up. So in the dream, I was almost experiencing some kind of phenomena that I've experienced in sleep paralysis before, where I felt like I was, I couldn't move, like this weird thing. I almost felt like some entities holding me back or something weird. It's a real supernatural, strange dream. And then I wake up, and as soon as I wake up, I hear 3 big wood knocks from like some woods across the street.
Was it at 3:33 a.m.?
It was at around 3 o'clock.
That is the magic hour, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. And then just like a couple minutes after that, the dogs that was in the house I was in wake up and start just going crazy barking, just like 1 minute after that.
Bigfoot phenomena is often accompanied with other types of poltergeist-like activity.
And it's not very rural, so it's just weird. That's the only time I've had like a strange dream that then had some kind of phenomenon in physical reality. That was
But just because you heard it doesn't mean it was real. Like physically,
true,
really there. It might have been still part of your dream. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
True. I felt very awake though. It was like one of those things, almost like Adam said.
It is interesting
really wake up.
that the dogs reacted.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it wasn't in response to the knocks. It was enough time after that.
What was the dream about?
I was just in the same house I was sleeping in, and I don't remember a whole lot, but just like interacting with someone in the dream and having that weird paralysis where I was trying to like move around in the house and walk, but I felt like, held down, or I felt that weird.
Could be something, quote unquote, haunting that house, was interacting with you.
Yeah, it was strange. I really don't get that feeling from the house. But
it could have been an
weird.
entity that can only communicate through dreams or via the astral plane. Or
yeah, it was pretty weird. But just like I've never had anything that had physical phenomenon afterwards like that.
That's cool.
Freaked me out pretty bad.
Don't be freaked out by it. You should be intrigued. And
Yeah. Well, I was, but
Well, it was
I
was
say
three.
that and
It
I'd be
was,
terrified if it happened to me. So
Right.
I understand.
it was 3 knocks, correct?
yeah,
And
that's very common. Yeah,
So you were around about 3 o'clock in the morning, and
there's a lot going on there.
yeah, there is a lot going on at that point.
I've often wondered, because the 3 knocks is a thing, and I just like connecting information, and it leads me somewhere else. And the 3, as we know, is like the universal SOS, right? And I've always thought, because it's so tied into the Sasquatch narrative with the 3 knocks, and also other cryptids, by the way, but I just find that I don't have any theories around it. I just find that an interesting tidbit, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's in a lot of phenomenon. It was strange, and I'm already really aware of that. So when it happened, I was like, oh yeah, there's the 3 knocks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like you kind of know what's going on, what's about to go down. Jerry, you were talking about a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about this. The time we got left. Let's talk about aliens aren't real, which is funny considering we just talked about grays. But
yeah, and I think this goes back to our discussion about co-creating our reality. I'm strongly on the side of that aliens are a construct that have been programmed into us, and I lean more towards the Josh Cutchin idea of how the culture shapes our interpretation of these energetic forces, fairies, whatever you want to call them, demons, whatever. Everything is demons, right?
yeah,
So I think that the narrative writers of the world have jumped on this phenomena and have shaped our idea of what they are into this threat, this space alien threat.
okay.
But there's, if you think about it, like the term alien and how it's applied to in America here, illegal alien, which is
there's confusion.
Right. There's lots of confusion, and it just means not of here, not from here. And that's a big deal. Like, so we can call a South American we can call them an alien in the same breath that, we talk about something from outer space. I just wanted to interject that.
Right. But generally, there's zero proof that there are any beings other than humans and animals here or have ever been here.
Yeah.
So that alone is pretty much pretty concrete evidence that it's not real, that it's not a real thing.
Right. I think it's far more likely that what we're dealing with is something that intelligence that has been here and that has been part of the human experience for as long as we've been around, and probably actually really needs us. I think there's a symbiotic relationship between the two of us. Whatever the other is, it needs us to manifest.
Sure. And if you go back to what I was saying before, if it's a collective shadow, if it's part of our collective unconscious, and it's just the shadow portion of that, then absolutely it can't exist without us, and vice versa.
Right.
We are the aliens.
Right. We are the aliens.
That should be the title of your talk.
We are the aliens. Yeah.
I haven't worked it out yet. I still have to write it, but yeah.
What's you guys' thoughts about past lives? What do you guys think? I mean, I can tell that you're kind of pretty pro on that, but that's something that I've kind of wrestled with myself, whether or not we've lived before. Because there's a lot of material out there about kids that say that they have lived before and that they've come up with information that later turned out to be correct.
It's very convincing stuff. I don't think there's such a thing as a past life, because I think everything happens now. There's no past. There's no future.
Okay.
Everything, So I tend to believe that there are infinite versions of me across. Like if you look between two mirrors and you see yourself going up, that's what's going on, right? So
there's a lot of Jerrys out there.
Right. And those would be what people would call past life. It's a simultaneous alternate reality. And sometimes you can draw on those things, sometimes you can't. I also tend to think that the dream state, or that altered state of consciousness, is a roundhouse or a nexus point where you can access those other adjacent realities. And sometimes your dreams are peeks into those. We've had people come on and talk about how I've even had this myself, where I dream that I'm at work all day, but not my real job. It's some other job, And I think that I'm actually supplanting that person or myself in another reality.
Can we all agree that work dreams are probably the worst?
They are. But I've had lots of dreams where I'm like on a demo team blowing up hotels and shit too. And
it's a cool job.
Yeah. I mean like criminally.
Oh shit.
So I've had some really strange experiences in my dreams. Lots of space dreams, spaceship dreams, shit like that, alien dreams. But who knows what's going on there?
Nish, what are your thoughts on the past life stuff?
I'm really right there with Jerry in all this. And the question for me becomes, what's going on with the wiping of our consciousness? What's going on with the wool over our eyes? And I come from the immortal perspective. And so I think that whatever consciousness is, which we're not quite sure of, and that's really, I think, at the core, we if we're having it, and I can't help but think about the idea of like Cro-Magnon and Neanderthals encountering each other. There's something in these, whether or not that's real.
If they're even real, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, whether or not that's real, but in the narrative that we're fed through our indoctrination programs called school, that it's an interesting idea that, because that leads us here. That leads us here. And so we've got to start actually looking at the stories and questioning and looking at the stories like myth, and to start unraveling things like what's going on with the idea of other lives, what's going on with the idea of other times even, and then start thinking about your life in context to all that. So I think about my life as me at 6. That's another life. That's literally another life. I don't even relate to the person I was. I don't relate to the person I was just a couple years ago, Right. And so if we just start bringing it into a practical application like that, it widens, and through that kind of stretching of ideas, I think we start to get a bigger glimpse of what's going on. And that glimpse for me is a taste of immortality. And I want to know, why can I not recall where I come from? What's the origin here? Where's the nucleus? Where is the kernel? I want to know. That's where I'm at, more so than questioning if I had other lives. Of course I did. Of course I do. I think you too.
Do you think that's because, like, I've heard people have experiences where they encounter something else and it kind of tells them, like, what the hell are you doing here? Go back. You're supposed to just do your job and be, the little monkey person or whatever. I mean,
I think those are aspects of themselves.
Okay.
But doesn't that sound like DMT, Jerry? The DMT elves?
It does.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Who did I just hear?
The Clockwork Elves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just heard an interview with, damn it. I think it was a dude on THC. I don't remember who, though. I apologize. But he was talking about DMT and what this person thought it was. And he said it doesn't bring you to another dimension or anything. What it does is it lifts the veils, so you can see the full reality around you.
Yeah.
And that these things all exist in different spectrums of light that we can't see. I thought that was really interesting.
And that's another whole amazing side to look at, is how limited our actual sensei experience is here. And we've all talked about this. We all know what's going on there. But if in practical application, which is where we have to come back to when dealing with far out ideas, is we need to remind ourselves that our vision is really actually limited. And where's it actually happening? It's happening in the back of a blackness-filled brain.
Yeah.
In dark matter. It's happening in dark matter.
I think it was Max Egan who was talking about it.
But I'm saying people have these experiences where that's basically explaining why you don't know where you come from, why these things are wiped, because you have a job to do here in this more limited reality.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Okay. But I've heard people have very strong experiences where when they encounter something, and because their consciousness is expanded, those things are like, tell them very clearly, what the hell are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. You're just supposed to be back doing what you're supposed to do. And then you can come back to this later.
That's like the whole idea of soul contracts and all that nonsense.
Yeah. It's all plays to the ego. That's all plays to the ego.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's kind of Gnostic too on some level.
It could be Gnostic, but it still plays to the ego, and you're not going to get anywhere down that path. And trust me, we all love our egos. I mean, it's like without my ego, Igor doesn't get pleasure. So, you know, I mean, again, bring it back to the practicality here.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we step back, we all have a job to do. It's all insignificant in the end. And it's hard for at this state, and the only reason I keep saying it's Homo sapiens sapien, it's hard to conceptualize that because the ego wants to feel wanted. It needs to have a task. It's like a working dog, and it wants to be appreciated. Otherwise, it feels like it's meaningless. The blackness, the ethers, it all can. Because of what other mechanisms are going on here, can just feel like fuck it, then I'm giving up. But that's just a trap. That's only a trap, in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't know. So
Yeah, it could be a trick too. It could be that trickster aspect of consciousness.
not wanting you to get beyond.
Sure. Well, it's also, you could look at it as a parasitic thing too, that there's an energy.
Stay and do your job so we can use you.
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. And that has to be factored in. I mean, and again, back to the practical, Candida needs the carbs to live in your system. So Candida's telling you chemically it wants that delicious, Hershey bar.
That bag of kisses in your back seat.
Right. And you may enjoy it, but are you enjoying it? What's enjoying it? What's really happening?
Right.
Yeah. Is it you ultimately, or is it the bacteria?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was a fun part of this conversation earlier, is the biology here. Because you break us down. I mean, you see like when something dies and how it decomposes, right? And the lunar cycle, whatever the lunar situation is, that blue cycle is the decay cycle that breaks things down. That cycle is important, of course, as part of all this. But what's really going on? And, it's like we have to start. This is the madness of my brain. Everything is at the core questioning why a function is a function. And then that can come up to the surface level. Why do I need to be governed? And I can get surface level and then caught in that trap, which is where this AI infection is, on the surface level, keeping us distracted. Because I think as a group, and I'm going to use this loose term, humanity is coming to is seeing and questioning on these levels of which we're speaking. And so we're constantly being brought back up here to the surface to fight about who's governing us and
The Great Awakening.
Yeah. And so we need to be the diversion here, the sleight of hand is stay on the surface and don't ask the bigger questions, because right now I think we can have a jump in consciousness again. And that's the one thing we don't know. What the hell is consciousness?
Yeah.
And I think it's clear today, the delineation between real humans, higher minded humans, and the quote unquote NPCs out there.
Absolutely. And we see it. We're all experiencing it with people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, most people, there's a lot of people out there that just they would not have these kind of discussions. They just would not talk about what we're talking about right now.
They're not capable. They don't have it.
There's football on. What are you talking about?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, more power to them if that's what they want. But it's like, I don't know. I couldn't exist in a world that doesn't have a higher thought to itself,
Yeah, I totally agree.
Having that kind of intellectually stimulating conversation. I mean, that's important. That's important to me.
I could be watching Avengers Endgame again right now. But
right? Yeah, for the 50th time. I haven't even seen it for the first time. So
it's such a good movie.
It is so good. It is.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of that stuff in and of itself is just distraction.
Oh, of course.
turning yourself. I mean, it's probably good because you don't want to be thinking about all this stuff all the time.
Everyone needs some entertainment and
you
stories.
need entertainment
mythology.
in your life. Yeah.
But just don't let it overtake your life. That's
That's again back to that Jungian thing. We're experiencing ourselves by the projection that's going outward, right? So the things that entertain us, the things that we detest, all that stuff that is keeping us afloat and moving in what appears to be a forward moving motion, that's our fuel. That's our inner fuel being projected outward, and we're digesting it back in and trying to integrate it. That's the point, I think, is trying to integrate it and then individuate from it so that you can tell yourself, you can tell what's you and what's not you. And that's the whole alchemical process. I mean, it's all right there. So people that do not question the whole NPC thing, where you interact with them and the level is just, there's only so much depth, right? The code is just very specific. There's so much depth, you're not going to get anywhere else. I have tried, and you all know I can crack a nut. And there are some people I have tried to find a way through, a glitch into, and I have not been able to on some. So I really do pull up to that. And for lack of a better word, the NPC thing, I really, really do. I think sometimes they are just filler.
Yeah. That's not to be confused with the Dolores Cannon background people type of idea. That's completely different. I did want to mention, though, that the like the Marvel movies, the X-Men specifically, those types of things could be affecting our future or the future of humanity in a way that we, if enough people want a mutation, want to be like Wolverine or whatever, who's to say that we don't co-create that reality in the future?
Bingo. That is that whole Jungian thing. We're projecting it outward.
Right.
And then with all this supposed junk DNA, well, what can we do? We can activate.
Right. Exactly. Right. All those things are probably there that we just have turned off.
It's code, right, Jerry? I mean, It's in there.
It's code.
I remember, I think I was talking to you, Jerry, about a cyberpunk book called Ribofunk, where there was all these future subcultures based upon this like weird bioengineering experimentation. Like you had one little subculture who had like scaly skin, another with wings, like stuff like that. I guess that's kind of similar.
I don't remember talking about that, but possibly. I never read a book like that.
Yeah, I was trying to recall.
That was the other Jerry. That was the other Jerry. We've got a new Jerry. For real.
Oh, I'm the same one.
That was Jerry 3.
No, we definitely have it. No, I think you jumped more than 1 point, Jerry.
Did you transcend into the ether, Jerry, and bring something back with you?
So when I was in the hospital, I had an experience, I'll put it that way, of leaving my body a few times. Okay. And the story I came back with was that I jumped into a new body, that I had swapped bodies with someone because of a longer story, which I've detailed in a CWS a few weeks ago. If you want to go back and listen to that, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I thought I had actually physically changed into another body. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
And Jerry is definitely not the same Jerry before.
Well, that is
Jerry
the thing.
says he is, but we know he's not. I mean, a lot of people that know Jerry really well know he's not the same Jerry.
Do you think that you had some kind of near-death experience, Jerry?
I think
that does change people.
I thought I had 2 while I was in the hospital, but according to the hospital, I did not actually crash. So mentally, I did.
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily know if you have to actually flatline
you still
have that experience, but you could still be in that state of consciousness.
Yeah. It's a long story.
By location.
Yeah, it's a long story, but basically I had agreed to die on behalf of someone else in my experience there. And when I actually did expire, I jumped up, if you will, to another level of existence.
Okay.
At which point I came back into another body. In fact, when I came to and I was trying to feed myself, I couldn't get my spoon to the right level where my mouth was because I thought it was somewhere else, which was really weird.
That is really weird.
Wow.
So do you feel like that you're in a new body now, or did you feel like that you were in another body and then you went back to yours?
I don't think any of that was real.
Don't think any of it was real.
Yeah,
Not in a physical sense.
It was all mental, whatever, hallucination, whatever drugs they had me on, which I still don't even know what they were during my ICU. This was all in the ICU too. So,
well, that's the thing though, is like, is it real, or is it hallucination, or are you actually having a real experience just through the hallucination? There's some fine lines there, I think.
It was real to me at the time.
Yeah.
And that's all that matters, because I went through that experience. I had that experience there.
Right.
I really did think the nurses were trying to kill me. I did punch a nurse in the face.
Wow.
These things happened to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said there. It's definitely for another kind of show. But those things are really important to factor in on a very deep woo level that I love, an avenue I love to find myself on.
All right.
All right, guys. Well, this has been excellent. I really want to thank you guys for coming on. Please tell us where you guys can be found. Nox Mente.
Everywhere. You can find us on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. It's called Voces Nocte, which means night voices in Latin. I'm sure you'll put links in the description for that. You could just go to YouTube and search for Nox Mente, our show, and you'll see our whole catalogs there. We have over 100 shows now. We've been at this for 2.5 years.
Wow, it's been that long. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
And just noxmente.com, right, Jerry?
Noxmente.com you can go to, which will take you to our website, which has all of our episodes listed. We don't have a paywall or anything. We're all free. We recently started a new show called The Obelisk, which we do every month, once a month on the week of the full moon. And we have random guests who discuss random stuff. It's not necessarily about dreams. It's not about dreams at all, really. Like this past week, we had Robert Phoenix talk about the astrology of this new year of 2020.
Which is a must listen. It's absolutely one of my favorite shows of all that we've done. This was a really juicy show. And especially since we're facing this astrology coming forward, it's a must listen.
Okay.
Other than that, any podcast player, you can just search for us. We're on iTunes and Apple Podcasts and Google. We're everywhere. Anywhere you can listen to podcasts, you can find us. Anywhere they can find you, they can find us.
Right. And
which is Conspirinormal.com.
Yeah, Conspirinormal.podomatic.com.
Or anywhere, and that is Conspirinormal with 2 eyes.
Yep. And you can find us YouTube, Spotify, all the good places that you can find podcasts. We're all on them. So, all right, guys, thanks so much. We're going to close out this section, and we will be back to close out this show on Conspirinormal. Yeah, so that was an interesting interview with Jerry and Niish from Nox Mente. I don't quite know if I got all of it, but there it is.
I think it was our most far out.
Yeah, definitely the most philosophical
podcast we've ever done.
Yeah, indeed.
dreams, reality, nature of consciousness, artificial intelligence, aliens, possession, incubus, succubus.
Yeah.
Suck a what?
Yeah. You got to hear one of my recent dreams, which was really weird, and you got to hear a dream from Serfiel too. So, and Jerry's kind of like in between life experience, I guess you could call it. So some really interesting things in that one. Is there anything that you wanted to add about that show?
No, I'm just a little, just taking on kind of a wild ride, man. I'm just...
Yeah. And then we hopped on with Cruising with Steak for about like 10, 15 minutes. Yeah. Talked to them a little bit about TTSA and Skinwalker Ranch stuff.
In addition, today we recorded a Patreon segment.
Yes. Yeah, we recorded a Patreon segment for our lovely patrons. We talked a little bit about the Diana Pasoka stuff that happened over the weekend, where her or someone claiming to be her posted some things on Twitter. So we kind of give our assessment about that. We talked about this at length for about 30 minutes, and just some wider implications of some of the things talk about the people that she's associated with. So if you want to hear that is on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/Conspirinormal. You can find that there. It's as little as $1 to join right now, guys. So
right now.
Yeah, right now. We're going to stress that, because at some point we are going to probably start raising that up. But I still believe that, if 1,000 people give us a $1 each, then that's an easy $1,000 for us. So we have a goal on there of about $500 right now, and that's to continue the podcast, buy new equipment, make everything sound better, continue to, this guy right here, love to just have to give him some money each week or each month to be able to, his time that he puts into editing this show, which is a lot and which is greatly appreciated. So please help us out. You can also do a one-time donation on Conspirinormal.com as well. If you cannot help us with that, you can go to YouTube, give us a subscription. We are almost about at 1,000 subscribers right now. We're about 875, I believe. So we only need 125 more to get to that.
And iTunes reviews.
iTunes reviews are also important. Please leave us a hopefully 5-star review. And also emails, guys. If you got any questions, send us an email.
We'd like to start sharing that stuff on the show too when we get more.
Yeah. Episode 300 is also on its way. I have some people that have signed up to be a part of it and to talk about their own personal experiences, and we really want to focus that on all listeners. So guys, please, you can hit me up, Adam Sane, on Conspirinormal, or you can hit me up on Facebook. You can hit me up on Twitter as well. The DMs are now open, so you can just send us a message there if you'd like. So if you want to be part of that, it is still open. We are thinking about doing some individual discussions and then also a roundtable. So we don't know how long this show is going to be, episode 300. So, all right, guys. Next time, Mark Anthony Wyatt is coming on. We're going to talk about his book, The Spirit of Cornwall. And we'll talk to you then on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal, or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.